throughout time, story has always played an important part of the role of civilization. And I believe that stories give us meaning. We see this in our culture, we see this in every culture around the world. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think the primary function of stories is that they give you the rules of the road. They tell you what to do, and they tell you what not to do. They tell you what works, and they tell you what doesn't work. Let's use the most primitive example of that you could use, Boy Who Cried Wolf. Now, Boy Who Cried Wolf story, I think we all know it. Boy's up there, he's tending his sheep, he's real bored up in the mountains, not a lot going on.
He cries wolf.
Cries wolf. He has all the people come down. They all come down, they say, there's no wolf here. Okay, and they go back to the village.
He entertained himself.
Entertained himself, like stories do. And he says, well, that was a lot of fun. Let's try it again. We get a reaction out of these people. So he goes back, he cries wolf. What happens? Well, people come back, no wolf. And they're pretty mad at this point. They're like, what's going on? There's no wolf, you're a liar. Well, the third time what happens is, Boy's up there tending his sheep, and a wolf actually does come, and he thinks, oh, okay, well, I know what to do. I've had a few dry runs. This should be pretty successful. He cries, wolf, wolf. Nobody comes. And why does nobody come? Well, because Boy Who Cried Wolf, he was a liar. He lied so many times, and then they didn't believe him when the real thing went down. And that story, that's the value that it teaches you. It teaches you not to be a liar, because people won't believe you whenever you really need them to have your back. So that's what stories do. They teach us the rules of the road. And it can be that primitive example of a boy who cried wolf told by cavemen around a campfire, or it can be on your iPhone, it can be on your movie screen, it can be at a theater, and with the most special effects laden, big budget features that you can have.
You know, it's interesting you say that it teaches us the rules of the road, because we have a concept for this in Hollywood that we call the moral premise, and it's essentially that same concept, and it's bad thinking, bad actions leads to bad outcomes and failure, but good thinking and good actions leads to good outcome and success. And this isn't my term. The moral premise is actually coined by a guy named Dr. Stan Williams. He's Will Smith's script consultant. He's worked on $1 billion worth of box office with a lot of big Will Smith movies. And it's funny because it's exactly what you just said with that idea.
So, okay, Daniel, now you're a movie maker. We're going to turn the tables here a little bit. Usually you ask questions, so I'm going to ask a question
Okay.
now. So you're a movie maker, and you know about the moral premise. You can sum it up in this nice sentence. What are some of your favorite movies where the moral premise is really displayed very vividly?
Okay, well, you know, there's a lot of research you've done on this, and we find that movies with a clear moral premise tend to do really well in the box office. So a movie that I liked that you've probably seen, since you've seen many movies.
I've seen many movies. I've seen a lot.
Okay, you mention movies all the time that I've never even heard of, and I'm like, I'm a director, but
I'm in the wrong industry, I guess.
I know. It's like
I've seen so many.
I feel like you've been a movie director somewhere along the line. You've been to film school and you've seen all these obscure movies that nobody else even watches and knows about. But an example of a modern movie that has a very clear moral premise that also did very well in the box office is the Disney Pixar animated movie The Incredibles.
Oh yeah.
So you've got Bob Parr. You know the story. They go into superhero secret protection, and then
evil villain.
They have to battle the villain as a family at the end. So the moral premise of The Incredibles, if you're wording it in a moral premise structure,
which is just one sentence.
Which is one sentence, and this is like what we learn from watching the movie would be this: battling adversity alone leads to weakness and defeat, but battling adversity as a family or battling adversity together leads to strength and victory.
That's a pretty good one.
And you watch the movie, and that's exactly what you learn. Bob Parr's battling it all alone, and that's leading him into further and further defeat, if you will. And the kids are all kind of doing their lone wolves at school, and it's not working. And the wife is essentially becoming isolated in her own little suburban mom role. And so everyone's battling their struggles alone. But as a family, when they decide to actually team up together, they're much stronger and they're victorious. So that's a basic concept of universal law that we know to be true, that when we work together, we're stronger, and that's beautifully communicated through the movie The Incredibles, and that's one of the reasons why we love that movie, because we learn something about ourselves that is true. We learn something about civilization that is true. We learn something about humanity that is true. So a few weeks ago, we watched the 007 movie. Tell me about the moral premise in this movie.
Oh man, well, it's my favorite 007 movie. We watched Dr. No, the first ever 007 movie starring Sean Connery, Ursula Andress, and Joseph Wiseman. Now, I'm a big believer that Sean Connery is the only 007.
Okay. I would debate you on that one, but
there's a lot of people that back me up too.
It is a good movie nevertheless. But I would
it
challenge you on
set
that.
the tone. And so put in the comments below, who is your favorite 007?
Pierce Brosnan.
Pierce Brosnan. Oh, we have a child of the 90s here. No,
Okay.
Sean Connery, he's going to win in the comments. We're going to see. But the moral premise of the first 007 movie, Dr. No, that set the tone for the rest of the franchise, is power harnessed to selfishness leads to destruction, but power harnessed to justice leads to success. And this is beautifully illustrated with the characters in the movie. You have Dr. No, the evil villain. He's a selfish guy. He's doing all kind of nuclear radioactive experiments and killing a lot of people to do them in order to destabilize the U.S. space program. And he's a bad guy. He's a selfish guy. And in the end of the movie, if you see it, what happens is he has these claws.
Because he lost his hands doing
all this nuclear stuff. Yeah, he went to radiation. He lost it in his pursuit of selfishness.
Metal hands.
He's got metal hook claws, and I won't ruin how, but they lead to his downfall in the end of the movie. Now you compare that to Sean Connery as 007. He's a guy.
He's also powerful.
He's also very powerful. He's the
very
definition.
capable. He has no he doesn't become stronger in the movie physically
No, he's a guy that it goes to show that you can violate a rule in movie making that you have to have character growth. He has none, and it's one of the most successful franchises of all time. He's a tough guy who just tests himself, who tests his own power, and he goes through a lot of tough things and a lot of trials, but in the end, he overcomes. But why is that? They're both powerful, but the main difference is that 007 does it for justice. He saves people. He saves the Bond girls. He saves his fellow agents. He saves the friends. He works for the good of humanity.
Space program.
Saves the space program, and as the show goes on, he saves Western civilization in the world. He stands for order and justice and law and human rights, stability. Whereas these other Bond villains, whether it's Dr. No or whether it's Blofeld or whether it's these other characters,
they're selfish, and their selfishness is what leads to their demise.
100%.
They're in that particular film, and I guess I won't spoil it exactly, but it's everything that he's done. Literally, is what winds up leading him to his
for both characters. For both characters. His Sean Connery as 007, his pursuit of justice leads him to this critical moment. Joseph Wiseman as Dr. No, his pursuit of selfishness leads him to this critical moment, and you see how it plays out very beautifully. It's one that I would definitely recommend everybody to watch.
Yeah. Now, okay, give me another example. We're familiar with the 007 movies. The 007 franchise has obviously been very successful, but give me another old movie that you've seen that has an excellent, clear moral premise that was also successful.
Well, I'll give you one of my all-time favorites. It's probably one you've never heard of, but it has had such an impact on film history. This is a movie, the 1968 mercenary action epic Dark of the Sun.
Oh, great film.
Yes,
great
we
film.
watched this together.
Yeah.
We watched this together, starring Rod Taylor, Jim Brown, and Yvette Mimieux. It's the story of American mercenaries that go to the Congo to retrieve diamonds from rebel-infested territory. And it's a movie that is one of Quentin Tarantino's all-time favorite movies of all time.
That's a good movie.
In fact, there are only 5 unedited copies in the world of this movie. Warner Brothers has released an edited copy that's available on DVD, but
you know what's
there are only
funny?
5.
I've got to interject this. We watched the DVD together, and Warner Brothers did not put a lot of money into releasing the DVD.
Not at all.
We put it into the DVD thing. It's got like the iMovie stock movie background, which is one button that says play. I was like, did you rip this? Like, where did you get this?
Warner Brothers ripped it.
They that's their movie. I mean, they released it that way.
Exactly. It's so weird because they have it in the vault, and there are 5 copies. Quentin Tarantino has 1, and at his film festival, he used to. I don't know if he does now, but he would show it every year.
This is a movie people need to see.
They need to see it.
Okay, it's such a great movie from a storytelling standpoint, but tell me about the moral premise, because I remember this movie. This has a very clear moral premise.
Well, the moral premise of this movie is disrespect for human life leads to chaos. But respect for human life leads to civilization. And it's a story that it is in a war-torn African nation in the Congo where you have really, really bad stuff happening, genocide and terrorism, violation of human rights, all these horrific things that these guys have to deal with coming from these bad guys and from within their own ranks. The good guys have got some bad stuff going on in their own ranks too. The main characters, Rod Taylor and Jim Brown, they both have a respect for human life, and that leads to a good outcome. It leads to civilization, and it leads to a sense of humanity. These other guys, they have no respect for human life. It leads to this horrific sense of inhumanity, and it's vividly displayed.
It's just, this chaos. And I love that one scene that takes place about in the middle of the movie. In case you guys haven't seen it, I don't want to ruin it too much because I really do recommend this movie.
Yeah, you definitely should see it.
The disrespect for human life, it leads to chaos, and it's so clear, and it's so well defined right from the very beginning. That opening, it's pretty much the opening, it's like the second scene in the movie, but it's the opening conversation. Rod Taylor's character is meeting with, it's like the dictator and the prime minister and the business guy.
Businessman,
and
it's talking
about
yeah.
like, they need the money from those diamonds to finance the political campaign. And it's like, kind of like, oh yeah, you can also, it was couched in the terms of saving the people, but it really had nothing to do with the humans. It was all about getting the diamonds to get the money.
Right.
And so just the value of human life so clearly presented right from the get-go, and then that conversation later on between Rod Taylor and Jim Brown, the character. Yeah. Oh, brilliant demonstration of what the moral premise is. Do you value human life, or do you not value human life?
And it's a movie where every part of the movie, this moral premise is layered upon layered upon layered. Whether it's an action scene and the consequences that come out of the action scene, whether it's a dialogue scene where these guys are talking about their values, it comes to the forefront. And every person movie, every character, it leads them to a certain decision point about what happens and what they're going to do, right up to the very end. It's nonstop action, non-stop drama, non-stop emotion. You laugh, you'll cry, it's great. So now, those are two of my favorites. Do you have any more? We've had some kids movies, we've had some old movies. Are there anything more contemporary as a filmmaker that you've seen that's a big impact?
Let me give you an example that's a TV show.
Okay.
I believe, that's not just I believe this, it was, at the time it was released, it was the most successful streaming show in the history of Netflix when it came out. It was relatively recent. The show 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah.
So very aggressive show. It's about suicide.
Very dark.
Very dark.
Very controversial.
Very controversial. A lot of stuff. But the show has a very clear moral premise. That's true. The moral premise in the way we would say it in our moral premise official statement
trademark system.
That's
one sentence.
That's one sentence would be this. It would be abdication and dishonesty lead to brokenness and bondage. But taking responsibility and truthfulness lead to healing and freedom. I mean, the moral premise in this, I mean, it's like something that comes right out of the book of Proverbs, something King Solomon wrote. Whoever conceals their sins, they're not gonna prosper. But the one who confesses and renounces them, they're gonna find mercy. I mean, it's like a Sunday school lesson with an F-bomb every other word. I mean, it's
interesting Sunday school.
Yeah, interesting Sunday school. No, but seriously, it teaches us very, very true.
Right, beneath this very dark and gritty veneer, there's a substance underneath that's very true.
The underlying moral premise that guides the whole story is true. So if you're not familiar with this series and the show, you have this young lady named Hannah. She commits suicide, and she leaves 13 cassette tapes behind that are all about 13 different students in her school, and those are the 13 reasons why she committed suicide. And the story is, all the kids in the school are, everyone's trying to just downplay it. No one wants to take responsibility. This is a bad thing that's happened. Everyone's kind of abdicating responsibility. They don't want the truth to come out. But then one student, Clay Jensen, he takes responsibility for his actions, and he desires truth. He wants to have the truth come out, take responsibility for our actions, and then heal and find freedom. And everyone else is like, there's this sort of like bondage of secrecy that they're all tiptoeing around, trying to make sure nothing comes out or nothing is known. And it's a brilliantly set up moral premise, brilliantly communicated. And some of the later episodes, the scenes with Clay and I believe it's the school counselor, I mean, it clearly lays out the moral premise. Throughout the whole show, it's based on that, but it clearly lays out this particular moral premise. And This series, though it was very dark, it had a real impact on people because it has a true moral premise. We all know that abdicating responsibility and dishonesty, they don't lead us to the right place. But when we take responsibility and when we are truthful, it leads us to a better outcome, healing, and freedom, and so on and so forth. And the show really communicates that very well.
That's fantastic. So if you are a creative person, a writer, an artist, a movie maker, if you're like my friend Daniel here, get The Moral Premise. Check out the book, The Moral Premise by Dr. Stan Williams. I think for me, it changed the game, and I'd never even heard of it. I knew a lot about this industry, but I had never heard of it. But it changed the game. It changed the game.
I didn't know about it immediately getting into the industry, but as I've worked in the industry and done more stuff in Hollywood, I became aware of it. But I think that this concept is more important it's important obviously for artists and creators who are making content, but I believe just viewers of content, so myself included, it's when we understand the moral premise and when you're looking for it. Like there's this particular neighborhood in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, that you can drive around, and if you don't have a GPS, it's really confusing because there are no street signs. You look around, you don't see any street signs, and you can get lost easily. But you ask a local, hey, I'm lost, I'm confused. There's no street signs here. Where am I going? And they say, oh, hey, look down at the sidewalk, and you'll see the names of the street are written on the curb at every corner. And it's all of a sudden, once you know what you're looking for, it's obvious. You know where you are. But if you're looking for street signs on poles, you don't find any. But once you know what you're looking for, it's obvious. And this is kind of how it is with the moral premise. Once you know what you're looking for, it's obvious.
You can see it.
And I believe it's really fun because that helps you discover even more meaning in stories, that contributes to our meaning in life as we see these moral premises and we think about, what were the consequences to those thoughts and actions. We appreciate the story more, we appreciate life more, and we learn more about what it means to be human. And humans love to discover what it means to be human.
100%. And if you're a viewer of a movie or reader of a book or a comic book or whatever, you never interact with it passively. You don't just watch. You take meaning from stuff. You got your favorites. I've got my favorites. And understanding the moral premise is a great way to say, oh, that's why I like that. This had meaning in my life. This had meaning in my life for this reason. This is why I go back and watch that movie time and time and time again. And, it can help you better understand yourself as you navigate through life and the world that we live in.